Thank you for watching or listening to this free podcast of the Young Turks. We want to make sure that you get some portion of the show every day, but if you want the full show, which is actually 5 segments, come become a member and support independent media as well. tytnetwork.com/join. Meanwhile, enjoy the free podcast. Welcome to the Young Turks. Huge show ahead for you guys. We have an exclusive that we're going to bring you in just a minute. Cenk Uygur, Anna Kasparyan with you guys as usual lately. And later in the program, yes, we certainly have a lot about the immigration issue, but in some unexpected circles, Trump's got a new theory on how Canada is screwing us over, and that also involves cross-border activity, but you might want to have your walking boots on because that's going to take a turn you're not going to see coming. And I've got a unique theory about how Trump actually might get Mexico to pay for the wall.
Interesting.
Right.
Okay.
And there's been some Nazi comparisons floated out there about the camps we got for the kids. Well, I'm going to read you some quotes, and I'm going to let you make up your own mind. And it is a little bit haunting. Okay, all right, but let's get started. Let's start with our exclusive.
All right. A flight attendant for American Airlines who wishes to remain anonymous reached out to us here at the Young Turks to let us know about what flight attendants are experiencing while transporting immigrant children across state lines. Now, in closed Facebook groups that have flight attendants participating in these discussions. This source says that they are outraged. She says that they are also thinking about blocking flights, and some flight attendants can't handle the traumatic situation, so they have decided to just call in sick and not show up to work because the flights are so devastating. Now, while this particular flight attendant decided not to go on the record, there have been a couple of flight attendants who have gone on the record in public Facebook posts, and our source actually directed me in their direction. And so I want to read some of their posts to give you a sense of what they're going through and how much they want to take action to stop this from happening. They've even reached out to the corporate offices for American Airlines to get confirmation that these flights will not continue, but they have not received any confirmation so far. So Cammie Daniels is one of the flight attendants. She says the following: as a flight crew, we experienced firsthand seeing these children helpless, confused, scared, and obviously traumatized. Remember, these are kids who have been taken away from their parents at the border. Their cry for help can be felt from their innocent eyes and their fragile body. We are trained to save lives, to remain calm, and lead all to safety during emergencies, to fight in-flight fires, to identify symptoms of sudden illnesses and administered life-saving actions, diffused anger, or resolve conflicts. The worst thing we see, or the worst thing, we were transfixed, helpless, and unable to provide protection to these innocent souls. When you hold them, they don't want your hands to leave them. It is not simple, heartbreaking scenes, but it penetrates to your soul and bothers you to the point of asking, where is the humanity? What happens to us? So, some of these posts are public, as Anna explained. What we have now is indication that some of the flight attendants are considering taking further action, including not showing up to work if they're going to be forced to transport these innocent kids to their detention centers. Apparently, they are being told, the attendants are, oh, that's okay, we're taking them to their new homes. And they know that that is not the case. Mm-hmm. The kids are dressed in similar ways, in sweatpants, when it's 100 degrees outside. It's clear, and there are apparently instructions given to the kids to not look at them. That's gonna get into the second person who spoke out publicly. But our source is saying now that a lot of the flight attendants are deeply troubled by this, and it's not just 1 or 2 people that have gone public on Facebook. So I asked the source if there were any flight attendants in these closed pages, private Facebook pages, who disagreed with the general messaging that she's seeing from these flight attendants. And that's the message of outrage, heartache. And she says, no, I mean, if there are flight attendants who do agree with the Trump administration's policy of separating the children, they're not saying anything on these pages. But she does say that overall, there have already been flight attendants who have called in sick because they don't want to deal with it. So that was Cami Daniels, who I read from. Linnea Gallant is another individual who works for American Airlines and who has been on flights that transported some of these minors. And here's what she had to say. Tonight, we transported 6 children on our flight. They weren't allowed to speak to us. We were not allowed to give them food that we sell on our flights. Their handlers answered for them when we asked them what they would like to drink. Their handlers ate our food and watched movies with earbuds that we show on our flights. The girls would not make eye contact with us. Apparently, all the migrant children on this flight were females. One of the children sat and cried most of the flight. They were in sweatsuits and kept in single file line. Mind you, it's 100 degrees outside. We were told they were being taken to be relocated in their new homes. In reality, they were being taken to detention centers, BS. She also writes, I have 2 little boys. If I was fleeing for my life and the lives of my 2 little boys, I would hope that they would not be ripped out of my arms when I was seeking help. Appreciate the comforts of your nice, cozy, big home and luxurious cars because there are children that are being kept in cages. Shame on you. Holding children hostages for a wall, shame on you.
So these 2 attendants keep emphasizing that they're not political and they almost never talk about politics on their Facebook page. But the one that Anna just read from said at the end, look, if you agree with this policy and you want to unfriend me, please unfriend me. Because I don't want to be associated with you if you think it's a good idea to rip these kids from their parents and send them to detention centers. And having seen the kids in person and having to escort them and transport them there, it's particularly chilling for them.
Right, it's a difficult situation, and these are all of the consequences that I don't think anyone considered, much less the Trump administration. Of course, it's traumatizing for these kids. They're on this flight, they're being treated as if they're criminals. They're not allowed to eat anything that's being sold on these flights.
So I have a guess as to why that is. They probably being overly careful, quote unquote, because of the bureaucracy saying, hey, listen, if you don't give them government sanctioned food and something goes wrong, you could be held responsible, and we don't want these kids getting hurt and then we get blamed for it, etc. I get it. On the other hand, we have to be human beings, and eating in front of the kids and while you're transporting them and not letting them eat and not letting them look at other human beings. I mean, does anybody really want to raise their hands and go, yeah, this is the country I want to live in? That's not what we signed up for as Americans, but here we are. And I guess the answer is, by the way, yes. As we told you on the show yesterday, 2 different polls. One has got it at 55, the other one's got it at 58% of Republicans saying, yeah, we do want this policy. Democrats say no, independents say no, overwhelming majority of the country says no. More than 2/3 of the country says don't do this, including now, to be fair, a lot of Republicans like Laura Bush famously spoke out about a former first lady, and now a lot of the politicians seeing those polls, like Lindsey Graham, are coming out and saying, yeah, we should probably change this policy. But right now, Trump is unmoved, and unfortunately, a significant majority of Republican voters are unmoved. I guess they look at those kids on those flights and go, well, they had it coming.
This is genocidal policy 101. In order to do things to people, like we had slavery here, you have to make them less than human. So you have to put them on flights and have them not speak, have them not look at you, because we can't have any connection of humanity to them. If we hear their cries, we have to come up with a reason why that's not true. We have to call them from the very beginning. This guy's first introduction to running for president, they're rapists, they're killers, they're coming to take over. Where have you heard that before? Those others are rapists, they're killers, hide your kids, hide your wives. We can demean them to less than human so that then we can do these things to them and you might not care as much anymore, because they're not humans. They're like pieces of random cargo that we're sending around the country. But it doesn't matter. They are children of people that are less than human, so therefore less than human too. It's the only way we can try to justify it, but enough people have woken up. but they're still gonna push it because that's what we've always done.
I mean, when you really think about it, it doesn't even matter if these children are American. If they fall under a certain social group, there's a portion of the country that doesn't believe in protecting them, even if they're Americans. I mean, why are we surprised? The Trump administration and its supporters, we're so supportive of the cop that shot and killed a 12-year-old black boy who was playing with a toy gun at a park. So why are we surprised? They don't see them as children. They don't see them as humans. You're absolutely right, JR. I mean, for all of this pro-life BS that they throw in our faces and preach about nonstop, I mean, all of a sudden they don't care about kids. They've never cared about kids. They care about judging people's lives and using their religious doctrine to do it. And that's it. And they will see minorities, especially immigrant children, as subhuman. They don't care. Treating them like they're criminals. These are kids that just got ripped away from their parents.
So later in the program, I'm going to go into more detail about what I looked up on the website of the Holocaust Museum and the language that the Germans used, not at the end, but in the beginning. The Jews carry disease. They're animals, they're vermin, and they're the ones that cause all of our problems.
Trump said that immigrants are infesting the country right now.
He said
That's
it today.
What he said it.
He said it today, and when they started taking the Jews away, here's what I want you to understand: we're not at the end of that, right? We're not. These kids are not being taken to be murdered. Okay, that's not happening. Okay, but understand that that's not how it began in Germany either. And in the beginning, they didn't say we're going to kill all the Jews. In fact, when they were taking the Jews away, they said we are not going to kill them. They said we are exporting them out of the country, and everything's going to be okay. And in a haunting line that apparently Border Patrol was using, especially in the case of the infant that was taken away while the mom was breastfeeding him, they said, "Oh, we're going to take your kids to get a bath," which is exactly what the Germans said when they were escorting people into. Now, that was not holding camps. That they escorted them to the gas chambers. Those were the baths. Okay. Now that's not what's happening here, but we should be careful about that language, and we should be careful about going down that road, and we should be careful about taking people's kids away and putting them in detention centers in obvious cages, and then changing the language and saying no, it's just a chain link fence, so it's okay, because we've seen in the past where those roads lead. And we don't want any piece of that. And if you're a decent human being, you shouldn't want any piece of that, including some of the propaganda and the beginnings of that process that unfortunately far too many of us are experiencing right now. I mean, we're seeing it with our own eyes. These flight attendants are seeing it with their own eyes. And it's hard to look away.
I also wanted
to. And you shouldn't, by the way, don't look away.
No, you shouldn't. I also want to draw attention to one other thing. The New York Times had a sit-down interview with Stephen Miller, and they recorded the conversation. They were going to use the audio for their reporting. The White House reached out to the New York Times and let them know that they did not want that audio to be released in any way, shape, or form. I'm not sure why, but the New York Times complied with the White House. I think it's fascinating that the very person who influenced Trump and pushed him toward this type of monstrous policy is the same person that the White House doesn't want on the record with audio talking about how he thinks these children should be treated and how this policy is a good idea.
I mean, look, even Anthony Scaramucci, who was chief of staff for about 13 seconds to Donald Trump, came out and said, well, like, you got to make up your mind. Is it the Democrats who are making you do it, or is it deterrence, as Miller has suggested, Sessions has suggested, or is it a good thing that we should be doing this, or is it not happening at all? They've used all three different things. No, it's not true. Secretary Nielsen said, don't believe the press. It's not happening at all. Then Trump said it was the Democrats' fault, and then Sessions and Miller say, no, it's a good thing that it's happening. Apparently, he said it in such outrageous ways that even the Trump administration doesn't want that getting out.
Yep.
So God knows what he said in those tapes. But we already know not only what they've said, but what they've done. And now as Americans interact with those kids, even if it's for a brief period of time before they're put into cages, it's heartbreaking. And I applaud the courage of these people who are speaking out and saying, I saw it with my own eyes and it's unbearable.
All right, let's move on to some other news. We will be going back to immigration policy later in the show, but first, other human rights issues. The United States has decided to withdraw from the UN Human Rights Council, and Nikki Haley is saying that it's over perceived bias against Israel. There is this notion by US officials that the UN is too tough on Israel, and so if they're unwilling to inform their toughness, the US will pull out. And today they announced, yes, we are pulling out. Mike Pompeo and Nikki Haley announced that the United States is withdrawing from this Human Rights Council. Haley has criticized the council in the past for hypocrisy and has said the group is engaged in a relentless, pathological campaign against Israel. So
let me just get this right.
Yeah.
Israel, for committing human rights violations that almost the entire world agrees to, and we've seen with our own eyes. We've seen it on videotape. We've shown you the snipers shooting people that are hundreds of yards away from the fence, medics being shot, killed, etc. That's not the problem. The problem is that a human rights council, whose job is to look after human rights, is criticizing Israel for those violations of those human rights. So we live in a topsy-turvy world where look away from the actual issue and yell at the people pointing out the issue. But to be fair, I mean, that's Republican 101. They do it. In fact, they're doing it with the immigration issue right now. They say it's not the fault of the Trump administration or the Border Patrol. They said, they came out and said the real victims, the Fox News did, to be fair. Fox News said the real victims are Border Patrol agents.
Oh yeah.
Okay. And the people who made them do it are the parents who brought in their kids. And the Human Rights Council had also criticized us for that policy just yesterday. So apparently we're mad about that as well. And by the way, it's also what Israel said. They said the Palestinians made us shoot them with snipers because they were protesting being occupied. They made us kill them. It's their fault, not our fault. And the United States goes, how dare you criticize Israel? It's obvious that the Palestinians, including the civilians who were killed and the medics who were killed, made the Israelis snipers fire from hundreds of yards away and shoot them and kill them. You see how it's their fault.
So the US had boycotted the UN Human Rights Council under George Bush's administration. Then in 2009, the Obama administration decided to join the Human Rights Council. And during that time, it was interesting because the number of times that the UN condemned Israeli force dropped considerably. And I want to get to those numbers to just prove that Nikki Haley's argument actually doesn't make much sense. Let's go to graphic 46. Before the United States joined, half the country-specific votes condemned Israel. During the first 6 years the United States was a member, resolutions critical of Israel dropped to 1/5. US membership also led to a sharp decrease in the number of special sessions that focused exclusively on Israel's treatment of the Palestinians. So the US gets involved, and we know that there were a number of incidents throughout the years, flare-ups in violence between Israelis and Palestinians. Yet the number of meetings and the number of times that Israel was condemned in that period dropped considerably when the US was involved.
Look, if we're not interested in human rights, maybe it's a good thing we left the council. I can't believe they've made us an international pariah. We're the ones who started the United Nations. We pushed for human rights all across the world. We were the shining city on a hill. Now, we're the ones that celebrate people who do human rights violations and abandon these councils. And when we're on them, we actively suppress any efforts to actually fight for human rights. So it's damned if you do, damned if you don't. And by the way, this is not just the Trump administration. Yes, Obama brought us back into the Human Rights Council, but as Anna just pointed out, while we were on there, we were like, don't you dare criticize Israel. It doesn't matter what they did. They are our political allies for a great number of reasons. And so we will not tolerate you telling the truth about Israel. And then Eliot Engel today, who is the top Democrat in the House on the committee that oversees the State Department, said we shouldn't leave. Why? Because we should stay to protect Israel more.
That's exactly what he said. But which, by the way, if that's really what your interest is, then yeah, I mean, having the US involved would lead to more pro-Israel influence within this Human Rights Council.
Unquestionably.
But just to look at the broader picture for a second, keep in mind that this is the third multilateral agreement that the Trump administration has pulled out of, right? So this UN Human Rights Council, the Paris Climate Agreement, and also the Iran nuclear deal. Now, they're different things, right? You're talking about a nuclear deal, you're talking about a council focused on human rights, but nonetheless, it gives you yet another example of the Trump administration taking a more isolationist approach on anything involving foreign relations, I should say. Now, I agree with those who don't want intervention in other wars, but why are we pulling out of agreements? Why are we pulling out of deals that actually keep a certain portion of the world or a region of the world safer? I mean, it's all about this protectionist ideology that Trump has.
Well, look, our enemies must be ecstatic. You know, whether it's political, economic, etc. If you're China or you're Russia, or even if you're Iran, you got to be thinking, excellent way to destroy yourselves. Withdraw from the world. Burn almost every treaty that you had, so no one can trust your word anymore. Don't get involved in pushing for human rights. Iran and China have to be beside themselves with happiness over this, right? Let alone Russia, etc. And they just took down pictures of Macron from the White House and put up pictures of Kim Jong-un. Now there's beaming pictures inside the White House of our president with dictators.
Cenk, how dare you, okay? You want nuclear war, right? That's what you want. Cenk wants nuclear war because we're criticizing photos of an authoritarian dictator up on the White House.
So I want a peace treaty with North Korea. I want treaties with all these different countries because it brings us together. But we're burning all the positive treaties and scorching them and then going, but wait. I can make a deal with a dictator, which by the way was not a deal. If it was an actual deal, I'd be in favor of it. We just gave him whatever he wanted and got nothing in return. And now we're attacking Canada. If you were a foreign government and you wanted America to destroy itself, you couldn't find a better president. I mean, he has attacked all of our allies and our treaties and our alliances and empowered all the people that we were concerned about. And then back to this issue of the Human Rights Council. One more thing, it just drives me crazy when they're so disingenuous. And by the way, the rest of the press, you have got to point this out. They say they're concerned about other countries that have human rights abuses that are on the council. For example, Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, Afghanistan, Egypt, Iraq, Qatar, all are allies. So now there's some non-allies on there like Venezuela and China and Cuba, etc. But wait, you're concerned about Saudi human rights abuses? I'm concerned about Saudi human rights abuses. But you got a funny way of showing it. If you're the Trump administration, you're giving them bombs to obliterate Yemen and cause one of the worst human rights conditions in the whole world. Don't give me crocodile tears about how, oh my God, golly gee, I'm worried about Saudi Arabia being on the council. They're one of our top allies because of the Trump administration. To be fair, because of all of our administrations. So whatever Saudi Arabia does, American government bows down. Whatever Israel does, American government bows down and then turns around and says, oh, well, I don't want to be on the council because maybe Saudi Arabia and some other people are on it.
Yeah.
And you guys are being too tough on Israel. Not incorrect. We just don't want you to criticize them for all the different abuses they have clearly done, and every organization has said that they have done.
Right, you can't criticize, Saudi Arabia being part of the Human Rights Council when you yourself are making deals with Saudi Arabia as we speak, when you yourself are helping Saudi Arabia in Yemen, as you mentioned, Cenk. But by the way, the Human Rights Council has those members listed as not free. It's not like the Human Rights Council is like, Saudi Arabia, pat on the back, right? So again, you're right, it's all a disingenuous attempt to make it seem as though, this council is worthless and that they're being too strict on, one country as opposed to all these other countries. That's just not true. I think at the heart of this issue is not just, the pro-Israel messaging that we've been seeing from the Trump administration. It's also the fact that Trump himself doesn't respect or care for human rights. He just doesn't. He doesn't care about it at all. You see what's happening at the border with children being ripped away from their parents. You see, how much love and admiration he has for, dictatorial people throughout the country, including Kim Jong-un. He has no respect for people who do believe in true diplomacy and being and the importance of being a good ally, like Justin Trudeau. Trump he doesn't believe in our system of government. He doesn't really believe in freedom. He doesn't believe in protecting humans and making sure that they don't fall victim to human rights abuses. He is the antithesis of what our founding fathers wanted as a leader for the United States. And he is an embarrassment. Day after day, it gets worse. And I don't know when it's gonna end. It feels like it's never gonna end. But at some point, we need to check his power. He is now doing things unilaterally more and more. He is pushing people away, refusing any type of advisor who goes against him. It's a dangerous situation. Regardless of your political identity, you need to realize that he doesn't want any checks on his power.
Who are the foreign leaders that he compliments? Duterte,
right?
A tyrant. Vladimir Putin, a tyrant. Kim Jong-un, a tyrant. President Xi in China, he just applauded for becoming president for life. So if you're a dictator, Trump's gonna have nothing but compliments for you. If you brutalize your own people, Trump will say you're very strong, you're a very tough and smart guy. But if you're a Democratic ally of ours, he will burn your house down, whether it's France, Germany, Canada. How many allies of ours has he attacked? And if you wanted to set a path to destroy our alliances and make us isolated and weak, this is exactly what you would do.
We got to take a quick break. When we come back, Trump will explain why the notion of judges is ridiculous in the United States. Stick around.
You're right in the middle of this podcast. We got another great segment coming up for you. If you'd like the full show, which is actually 5 segments, go to tytnetwork.com/join. You become a member, you support the show, you support independent media, and you get the whole 2-hour show ad-free every day. Let's go do it now. All right, back on the Young Turks. By the way, we've got a whole podcasting network now that we launched recently. I want everybody to check that out. tyt.com/audio is where you can go. And Anna's show, No Filter, is on there, and that's a great podcast. And then you've got Mouthy, Messy, Mandatory on there as well. Katie Anthony and Ronit Fineglass Plank. They discuss feminism, family. Look, the bottom line is they're. Why?
No, because you were just like all tongue-tied. You're like, yeah, whatever. Okay, the bottom line.
Yeah, I'm going to stop reading that shit. Oops. Anyway, it's both a fun show and a smart show. That's what I like about it. Okay, and I agree with them a lot. And I go, oh, that's a good point. And sometimes even when I very rarely disagree with them, and I go, but that was reasonable.
Yeah,
that was reasonable.
Yeah.
Okay, so please check that out. Jimmy Dore's on the podcast network. Nina Turner is. Teray is. So tyt.com/audio. Okay, JR, what do you got on tweets?
Real fast. But first of all, Cenk, speaking from the heart, that's the real Cenk Uygur. A couple of TYT live tweets from Jeff Horton. Delegitimizing the courts is the third way authoritarian regimes try to take over democracies. Also, Tim Klein Jr. in that same vein said dictators don't like judges, obvious. Good stuff. And the TYT super chat, $35. No, I missed that. I'm sorry, $10 from No Noon Consequence. I hope I didn't mess that up too much. It's not just democracy, guys. For once, I disagree. It's every government back through time wanted judges. They called them lords and kings. Judgment is a key part of a government of laws, not just democracies.
Trump bragged about, I'm going to bring rule of law back.
Yeah, right.
How can you? Well, that's
hilarious.
How can a
criminal do that?
Yeah, but how do you do rule of law without judges? I mean, he's just such an imbecile. I mean, even if you don't believe in judges and you want to be a tyrant, you don't just say it, you moron. He's so stupid.
And a $5 one also from the super chat, Marie Laposta. The rant about judges is 100% from being a crappy businessman who doesn't want to hire people to do the work that keeps the company or country running.
Yes, he keeps wondering, why aren't you all working for me like when I was running a small business, right? A failing small business. And what do I need all these employees for? I remember running my business just fine, except you remember wrong because you bankrupted 6 of them. Couldn't make money in real estate in a time that it was booming in New York. And he couldn't make money running a casino. Imbecile of the highest order and perhaps mentally damaged. And then there's 28% of the country that believe he's God. In all the polling, the 28% strongly approve of Trump and have never moved in all the polls throughout all this time. And that's the magic number. I found as I was looking through all the polls, it was 28, 20, like that's it. 28, I used to say 25, I used to say 30, now we know what the number is. 28% of the country wants to be led by a mentally damaged child, as long as he's authoritarian and hates the same people they hate.
Attorney General Jeff Sessions is frustrated that so many critics are comparing the zero tolerance policy of separating children from their parents who then get prosecuted for misdemeanors to Nazis and Nazi policy. He says that it's an exaggeration, and he defended himself while appearing on Laura Ingram's show. Take a look.
Nazi Germany, concentration camps, human rights violations. Laura Bush has weighed in, Michelle Obama, Rosalind Carter, got all the first ladies. Going back to Eleanor Roosevelt, she's apparently weighed in as well. General Sessions, what's going on here?
Well, it's a real exaggeration. Of course, in Nazi Germany, they were keeping the Jews from leaving the country, but this is a serious matter.
So, real quick, he continues to say we need to think about it, though, be rational and thoughtful about it. We want to allow asylum for people who qualify for it. Remember, he does not believe victims of gang violence or domestic abuse qualify. But people who want economic migration for their personal financial benefit and what they think is their family's benefit is not a basis for a claim of asylum. The vast majority of asylum seekers are fleeing terrible violence in their own countries.
Okay, let's break this down in 3 different ways. First of all, Laura Ingraham just gave you a softball and you whiffed. So you were supposed to say, it's an outrageous comparison. I am deeply offended. I think all the people who had family members who suffered in the Holocaust are deeply offended by this. It's a softball and you blew it. Instead of saying like the standard political spiel where you take the moral high ground, you said, well, I mean, they were trying to keep the Jews in the country. We're trying to keep these people outside the country. In other words, we're being just as mean, but we're doing it in the opposite direction where we don't even want them in the country. No, don't say that. Okay, and then the secondary problem with that is that it's not even true. The Germans said, no, we're moving the Jews out of the country, and a lot of the concentration camps were in the greater German Empire after the wars began in places like Poland. And they were saying, don't worry, Germans, we're taking these diseased animals outside of our country. Oops. So now let's get to point number 3, the most important one. Are the comparisons fair? Well, so of course, we're not doing what the Nazis did. There are no gas chambers, 13 million people haven't died. And so that should be clear to everybody. But I wanted to go back and see if I was remembering it wrong, because it seems like they're using a lot of similar language that the fascists in Germany used when they began their campaign against Jews and Roma and people in the LGBT community and all the other Poles, all the other people that they discriminated against. So I went to the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum website. And so here are a couple of quotes that I saw on there, and then I'll read you Donald Trump's quotes. So here's what the Holocaust Memorial Museum says. The Nazi regime did not limit distribution of propaganda linking Jews and vermin or disease to Germany. In occupied Poland, Nazi propaganda reinforced the policy of confining Jews to ghettos by portraying them as a health threat requiring quarantine. So reference to vermin who infest a place, and they needed to be put in a specific area and contained in that area, and that wasn't all. I found more. They went on to describe it this way: exploiting pre-existing images and stereotypes, Nazi propagandists portrayed Jews as an quote alien race that fed off the host nation, poisoned its culture, seized its economy, and enslaved its workers and farmers. Now, this is not stuff they wrote after the Trump administration. That's been on the website for a long, long time. So now let me read you Donald Trump's quotes. And this is from just this week. Here's a tweet. Democrats are the problem. They don't care about crime and want illegal immigrants, no matter how bad they may be, to pour into and infest our country. Like MS-13, they can't win on their terrible policies, so they view them as potential voters. So using the word infest to say that these immigrants are coming in and they're going to infest us with presumably disease and the crime that he has often talked about. Obviously, the very first press conference he had when announcing his presidency, he said they are criminals and rapists and we have to do something about them. Here's another tweet from this week. He said the people of Germany, interesting, are turning against their leadership as migration is rocking the already tenuous Berlin coalition. Crime in Germany is way up. That's not remotely true. We talked about that on the show yesterday. A big mistake, he continues, made all over Europe in allowing millions of people in who have so strongly and violently changed their culture. I mean, he literally is talking about how the Germans must protect their culture against the immigrants that are invading their culture. It's just nearly identical to what the fascists said, the Nazis said in the beginning of their regime and throughout their regime. Okay, so he also said early on, again, when he first started his campaign, quote, tremendous infectious disease is pouring across the border.
Jesus Christ.
The United States has become a dumping ground for Mexico and in fact, for many other parts of the world. And of course, you all know the word that right-wingers in this country have been using for a long time and Trump and his officials use. They call them illegal aliens, an alien race coming in to infect us. Now, have they dehumanized them and called them animals? Well, take a look.
We have people coming into the country or trying to come in. We're stopping a lot of them. But we're taking people out of the country. You wouldn't believe how bad these people are. These aren't people. These are animals. And we're taking them out of the country at a level and at a rate that's never happened before.
Saying that they're not even people. Fascism 101. Finally, I want to read from the Department of Homeland Security that put this edict into place this year. They said an alien's receipt of public benefits comes at the taxpayer expense. And availability of public benefits may provide an incentive for aliens to immigrate to the United States. In other words, they're coming to seize our economy and take advantage of our current workers, and we cannot let these animals, these aliens that infest our country and take our resources. These are dangerous times. We saw how this started before, and here we are again. So I don't know where this leads, and I believe in America, and I believe we are strong enough to turn it back, but that's what we have to do. Because if it goes down this road, we know how it ends. It's not like they were subtle about their language. They didn't use code words, they used the same words. Don't let them finish this project. Don't let them go to the end of that road. We've got to take our country back, and we've got to fight for democracy and decency.
All right. Fox and Friends is continuing to support Donald Trump and his administration in the way that they are treating immigrant families who come to the border seeking asylum. Children are still being ripped away from their parents, and the numbers have now reached about 2,300 since the zero tolerance policy was implemented. Now, a number of hosts on Fox News continue to rally in support of Donald Trump. Let's hear from Laura Ingraham and her description of what some of these detention facilities seem like.
So since more illegal immigrants are rushing the border, more kids are being separated from their parents and temporarily housed in what are essentially summer camps, or as the San Diego Union Tribune described them today, as looking like basically boarding schools.
She referred to them as summer camps, as she has an image of children sleeping on the floor with foil blankets. Oh, if they're like summer camps, would you send your children there?
Yeah, to live in cages. To be fair, they are let out for 2 hours a day. 22 hours they must be confined into a cage. If anyone goes past security in a way that is not cleared, huge alarm bells sound saying that there
is a possible escape.
There's a possible escape. And so would you send your kids to a camp where they're only allowed to see the sunlight 2 hours a day and where they live in cages? I don't know. Maybe Laura Ingraham would. Maybe the right wingers would be like, "Ooh, that sounds like good punishment, authoritarian government. Get them used to it."
But that video that we just showed you is incredible for a number of different reasons. Yes, Laura Ingraham lied. That's something that we already know about. Like, she does that on a regular basis. But her viewers saw the same video. They saw the same video of her talking about how this is just like summer camp, while that image is right next to her. It's right next to her face of kids laying on a floor with foil blankets on top of themselves. Like, that's the thing. Fox News insults the intelligence of their viewers like so brazenly that they will show you the evidence debunking what the host is saying as the host is saying it, and the viewers are still like, yeah, summer camp. Look, and to give some people credit, she did get criticism for calling it a summer camp, and so she responded to that criticism. And here's what she said. The San Diego Union Tribune today described the facilities as essentially like what you would expect at a boarding school. So I'm gonna call it a boarding school.
So that's her walking it back.
That was her walking it back. By the way, if you go to the exact article that she's referencing, the Tribune article included that the facility contains aspects that resemble a prison. Oh, that's interesting that she left that part out. Let me read you a little excerpt from that article. It's surrounded by fencing that is backed by privacy netting, and a sign at the gate warns visitors that it's under video surveillance 24 hours per day. If someone opens the front door of the facility without first swiping a badge, an alarm blares through the hallway warning of a potential escape. So she is a liar, and of course she decided not to include one of the most relevant parts of that article in her little spiel there. Okay.
You know, sometimes torturers try to get you to say things that they know are not true in an effort to break you. So they'll show you something and say, now call it something else. And they keep torturing you until you call it something else. I guess Fox News has done that in slow motion. So they could show you kids in a cage and then say, now remember, this is not a cage, it's summer camp. And the audience goes, that's right, it is a summer camp, I agree. Now, to be fair to the Fox News audience, and the first time I'll ever do that, apparently enough of them called her out that she backtracked in the middle of the show, which is pretty unprecedented.
Right. Now, Steve Doocy is another cheerleader for Trump, so let's hear what he has to say.
The president and the White House made it crystal clear yesterday they're going to continue this maximum pressure policy of separating parents from children at the border to make the point that that is the law of the land. You don't like it, change the law. Also, it's a message to people who are thinking about coming into this country illegally. Don't do it because you'll be arrested, and there's a possibility your children will be separated from them if they are in fact your children.
So what I realize is when they say change the law, they don't mean that there is a law that forces the administration to separate the children. They're saying, no, there's a law that prevents the children from going to prison along with their families. So change the law, in essence, get rid of the Flores settlement so we can imprison the children with the family. They're monsters, they're monsters.
They actually do mean that. They do.
It's insane.
It's amazing. It's amazing. There was many amazing things there. But my favorite was the very end where he's like, if in fact it's their children. This is a talking point they've now gone back to several times with the whole child actors, and then Trump talked about how they're trying to sneak in by using kids. Can they name a single example of a family that came in with kids that weren't theirs? Not one. I've not seen a single one in the press. But they're like, it doesn't matter. We live in a fact-free world. Let's just pretend that they're smuggling in what? Little people who are part of MS-13, or are they MS-13 and the kids are props? What kind of lunatic conspiracy is Steve Doocy talking about? There's not any evidence that the kids are not the parents.
And
right?
by the way, for anyone who thinks, okay, I don't know, maybe this will work as a deterrent. Preliminary data indicates that it has not worked as a deterrent. This was implemented back in April. And since April, the number of people seeking asylum has gone up by 5%. Because here's the thing, when gang violence threatens your life and your children's lives, you are willing to risk anything to get them to safety.
Yeah, and I thought it was the Democrats' fault. Why are you bragging that it's deterrence now? So are you giving the Democrats credit for coming up with good deterrence?
They never.
Oh, right, you were lying when you said it was the Democrats' fault. That it was their policy that was ripping the kids away, right?
Right.
Interesting admission there. Now, you have his buddy Kilmeade?
I do, but before we get to Kilmeade, I actually want to go to Ainsley because she actually makes my point for me, and she doesn't realize it because she's an idiot. Take a look.
You can't even really blame an administration. These are people, Republicans and Democrats, that are serving in the Senate and in the House, and they have to change this. If you don't like it, they need to change the plan. Jeff Sessions says that they're not being abused. He says the conditions are good. He said we spent $1 billion last year, your taxpayer dollars, to make sure these kids are safe.
So when I say she's making my point for me, I do not agree that the conditions are great for the kids. They're not great. We've had numerous reports showing that the facilities, the detention centers are understaffed. Some aren't able to get the medical treatment that they need. They're sleeping on the floor. I mean, they showed that image in other video clips. But the point that she's making about taxpayer money is very relevant because remember, right-wingers think we're paying in government programs to all these illegal aliens, which by the way, for the billionth time, federal government aid does not go to undocumented immigrants. It is banned. On a state level, depending on which state you're in, yes, possibly. But on a federal level, they get no government programs. But the argument by the right wing is we can't be wasting our limited resources on undocumented immigrants. Now, we can prosecute them for misdemeanors, detain them for an indefinite period of time, detain their children for an indefinite period of time, give government contracts to the tune of tens of millions of dollars to private companies to detain these children for an indefinite period of time. That's okay, that money's well spent.
So the money's well spent if you're crushing them.
That's right.
But if you're actually welcoming them or being decent human beings to them, then it is not well spent. I'll add one last thing to what Anna said, which is that a lot of the undocumented workers in America do pay into Social Security and Medicare through the payroll tax, and they never get it back. So overall, they actually pay more into the system than they get out of the system. But you'll never hear that on Fox News. Why? Because they want to go with propaganda. These aliens are coming in and taking your money, and you should hate them.
Finally, Brian Kilmeade.
And as Nancy Pelosi steps over the homeless in San Francisco to hop on a plane to go to the border, to have a heart bleed for people from other countries that are coming here, these kids come in, fantastic, Oprah Winfrey. I'm glad you're upset about it. But these kids get fanned out to working class neighborhoods into our society, and then they have to be paid for by English as a second language, and then they got to be schooled, and a lot of them, sadly, when in my neighborhood, turn into MS-13.
They all turn into MS-13. What an idiot. I mean, it's unbelievable. In your neighborhood, I'm sure your neighborhood is just riddled with gang members and gang violence. And oh, can you believe it? All these terrible people who have to take English as a second language in grade school, kind of like me. I had to do that. I was actually born in the United States. English is my second language, and I think that I turned out completely fine. I mean, it's not just Kilmeade. That entire panel of buffoons, it's embarrassing.
So the two hilarious parts of that. One hilarious, one despicable, actually. The hilarious part is that Kilmeade's living in a neighborhood filled with MS-13.
Come on.
Let alone MS-13 kids.
That's why he stumbled while he was saying it, because I think he realized how ridiculous that was.
In your neighborhood. Come on, Kilmeade's a multi-millionaire. Really? You're living in a neighborhood filled with MS-13. Kilmeade's coming out of East Los Angeles, right? And it's like, hold on, I gotta go on Fox News. Okay, so now the despicable part. The kids that you have empathy for, I don't want you to have empathy for them. And the hardest thing is to get people to hate kids. Maybe you could hate the grown-ups. Hey, they're a different color, they're the others, they're taking your food, they're taking your property, and we talked about it earlier in the show. You know, it's the others that are vermin, that are disease-ridden, that are criminals, etc. And it's easy to do that if you've got a right-wing audience who's receptive to that message. But when you see crying kids, when you see a 2-year-old kid, it gets harder because ultimately we're all actually decent. We have DNA that, yes, is competitive and sometimes does terrible, terrible things, but we also have DNA that makes us wanna be a community and work together and socialize and actually care about kids. But Fox News has to get that out of you. So they send Kill Media in to say they might be kids now, but later they're gonna turn into MS-13. And they're gonna come to get you. Never trust any of them, including their kids. One day, there'll be multi-millionaire MS-13s living in my neighborhood.
But remember, first they're gonna take English as second language classes.
Yeah,
and then they turn into MS-13.
Because that's what violent gangs love to do. MS-13 is like, hey guys, you're gonna take English as a second language? And then we'll move in next to kill me.
All right.
Think about that because you know when Trump called them animals and stuff, and there was the clarification he was trying to come up with saying, no, it was MS-13 I was talking about animals. You guys are conflating my point and saying it's the wrong thing. So it was in the context of talking about that, but that's how it works. You'll say, hey, they're all gonna be MS-13 anyway when you see a 5-year-old on the floor under a foil blanket crying. Kill me to call them MS-13. So now we're calling them all the same. So when you say they're all MS-13, and you say MS-13 are animals, you're saying they're all MS-13. You're saying that they're all animals.
Yep.
So you can say it in all these different contexts. You can fool enough people to think, hey, they're totally taking them out of context. No, you call people animals, you make them subhuman, and then you call everyone who looks like that animal an animal, and even the ones who aren't the animals who are committing any kind of gang crime, they're the same thing to everyone else. That's how it works.
That's exactly right, JR. And that's why I read the quotes earlier in the show about how the fascists started in Germany. They didn't just say, hey, let's just all hate the Jews randomly. Let's pick a scapegoat. They didn't say that. They said, no, the Jews are coming to get you. We're trying to protect you. They're criminals, they're stealing your property, they're animals, they're diseased. And they didn't just say, hey, let's go kill them all. They first had to get you to believe that they weren't fully human. And they did it by doing the same exact thing that you're seeing with your own eyes in this country. Now, we haven't gotten to those ends yet, and I hope we never ever get there, and I believe we're strong enough that we won't. But they would say, yes, yeah, oh, the little Jewish kids, you have sympathy for them? No, they're part of the same diseased people who are coming to take your property, and one day they'll grow up and they'll take your stuff from you, right? So I don't know if these actors that Fox News gets on and pays a lot of money to read this stuff, if they are even bright enough to know what they're doing. But either way, it is truly reprehensible.
Well, when we come back, there is action being taken, some by politicians and also by American citizens, Americans who are outraged by this. So there is a little bit of hope. I want to give you guys that story when we come back.
Thanks for watching or listening to this free version of the Young Turks podcast. You know that the full show is at tytnetwork.com/join. If you become a member, you get the full show ad-free. We love you for watching or listening. Either way, there's gonna be a new free podcast tomorrow. You can keep on doing that. But if you wanna get the full show ad-free, tytnetwork.com/join.